"Daddy isn't dead. He's under the floorboards," said the little white boy. Detective Sarah Jenkins almost dropped her coffee mug when she heard those words. 5-year-old Noah was sitting in the station chair, swinging his legs and clutching a toy truck. With the frightening naturalness of a child recounting a playground game, he repeated, "Daddy is down there, where Mommy put the new tiles." "Kids have such vivid imaginations," muttered Sergeant Miller, not even glancing up from his paperwork. He probably saw it in a cartoon. But there was something in Noah's eyes that made Jenkins hesitate. Those large, serious eyes didn't hold the typical fantasy of a child making up stories. They were the eyes of someone who had seen something they should never have witnessed. Jenkins, a veteran detective in the busy city of Crestwood, recognized that look. She'd seen it in trauma victims, but never in a child so young. The neighbor who brought the boy in, Mr. Henderson, a 67-year-old black man, insisted something was wrong. "Isabelle has been missing for 4 days, Detective. It's not like her to disappear like this, leaving her son behind. She wouldn't even go to the grocery store without telling someone where she was going." Jenkins knew Isabelle by sight. A respected architect in the community, always punctual for her son's school appointments, the kind of mother who carried photos of her son in her purse and never missed a school presentation. The contrast with her husband was stark, like night and day. Gregory Hayes had appeared at the police station only once, filing a missing person report for his wife with the same detached ease as someone renewing their car registration. A well-dressed black man. He spoke with a condescending tone. Jenkins recognized all too well the voice of someone who had always been taken seriously because of his success and family name. "My wife sometimes travels for work without telling me," Gregory had said, adjusting his designer watch. "It's no big deal. Isabelle is unpredictable." The pause before unpredictable had sounded as false as a counterfeit bill, but Jenkins hadn't paid much attention to it at the time. "Detective," Mr. Henderson lowered his voice, looking around nervously, "there's something I didn't tell you. The night Isabelle disappeared, I heard screams coming from the house, strange noises, as if someone was dragging something heavy across the floor. And the next day, a renovation crew showed up, working late into the night." "What kind of renovations?" Jenkins felt a chill run down her spine. "The kitchen floor." Gregory said it was a surprise for Isabelle when she got back from her trip. The irony in the man's voice was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Jenkins remembered Gregory vaguely mentioning a small renovation during his statement, but it had seemed like an insignificant detail at the time. Now, looking at Noah, Jenkins felt like she had missed something criminally important in that initial conversation. The boy was drawing on the paper she had given him, creating what appeared to be a kitchen with a woman lying under a tiled floor. The details were disturbingly accurate for a 5-year-old. "Noah," Jenkins said, crouching down to the child's height and modulating her voice to sound as gentle as possible. "Where exactly is Daddy? I mean, Mommy. In the new kitchen." "She's in the new floor," he replied without hesitation. "Mommy said it was our secret, but she's very cold down there. She cried very loudly before she went quiet forever." Mr. Henderson covered his mouth with his hands, horrified. Miller finally looked up from his paperwork, realizing for the first time the absolute gravity of the situation. "Noah, sweetheart," Jenkins continued in a controlled voice, "can you tell me what happened the night Mommy went quiet?" The boy looked at his toy truck as if asking for permission to tell the secret. "Mommy hit Daddy with a big pot from the kitchen. Daddy fell to the floor and didn't get up. Then Mommy cried a lot and said it was his fault for being stubborn and not listening." A deathly silence fell over the police station. Jenkins felt her heart pounding in her chest. And then, what did Mommy do? "She took the blue sheet from my room and wrapped Daddy all up in it. Then she dug a big hole in the kitchen and put him in it. Then the men came with a new floor and covered everything up. Noah spoke as if he were describing his grandmother's cake recipe, his naturalness making it all the more disturbing. What Jenkins didn't know was that at that very moment, 40 miles away, Gregory Hayes was in his private lawyer's office, calmly explaining why he needed to speed up the life insurance process for his missing wife. He had no idea that Isabelle had discovered something about her husband's offshore accounts that was worth much more than her own life. Much less did he imagine that Noah, despite his 5 years of age, was keeping secrets that would turn this routine disappearance case into the biggest criminal twist the city had ever seen. As she looked closely at the boy's drawing, Jenkins noticed a detail that made her blood run cold. He had drawn not only a woman under the floor, but also small rectangular bags next to her, as if he knew exactly what else was buried in that hastily renovated kitchen. 2 hours after Noah's revelation, Jenkins was on the phone with Judge Sterling trying to get a search warrant for the Hayes residence. "Sarah, are you asking me to authorize digging up a family's home based on the testimony of a 5-year-old? The judge's voice sounded skeptical over the phone. "That won't hold up for 5 minutes in court." "Sir, we have a child who has described specific details about a crime, a suspicious renovation carried out immediately after the disappearance, and a husband who is displaying an unusual coldness for the situation." Jenkins felt frustration rising in her chest. "And do you have any physical evidence, adult witnesses? Anything besides the word of a traumatized little boy?" Jenkins hung up the phone harder than she intended. 15 years on the force and she was still facing the same problem. When it came to wealthy, influential families, bureaucracy became an insurmountable wall. Miller approached the desk with a grim expression. "Chief, I just got an interesting call. Gregory Hayes was at his lawyer's office this morning. It looks like he wants to speed up his wife's life insurance claim." "How convenient." Jenkins massaged her temples, feeling a familiar headache coming on. How long has Isabelle been missing? 4 days, and he's already chasing money. At that moment, the station phone rang. Miller answered, and, after a few seconds, covered the receiver with his hand. "It's him, Gregory Hayes. He wants to talk to you." Jenkins took a deep breath before answering. "Detective Jenkins." "Detective, this is Gregory Hayes. I heard my son was there today." His voice was controlled, but there was an underlying tension he couldn't completely hide. "Your son is fine, Mr. Hayes. He was worried about his mother." "Noah has a very active imagination, Detective." "I hope you didn't take a little boy's fantasies too seriously." The condescending tone was unmistakable. Jenkins felt her pulse quicken. "What kind of fantasies, specifically?" "Oh, you know how kids are. Always making up stories about monsters under the bed, people buried in the backyard." Gregory laughed awkwardly. "It's just his way of coping with his mother's temporary absence." "Interesting that you mentioned people buried, Mr. Hayes. Your son was very specific about the location." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Detective, I hope you're not considering disturbing a grieving family based on the fantasies of a traumatized child. My lawyer would be very disappointed in such an unprofessional approach." The veiled threat was crystal clear. Jenkins knew the game. Influential families always had expensive lawyers ready to turn police investigations into bureaucratic nightmares. "Just doing my job, sir. Have a nice day." After he hung up, Jenkins stared at the phone for a long moment. In her career, she had learned to read people, and Gregory Hayes had just confirmed her suspicions in the worst possible way. No one spontaneously mentions people buried unless they have a very specific reason for it being on their mind. Miller approached again. "Chief, there's one more thing. I got Isabelle's phone records for the last 30 days. "Interesting." Jenkins leaned back in her chair. She made several calls to a divorce lawyer the week before she disappeared. A piece of the puzzle fell into place. Isabelle was planning to leave him. And there's more. A quick check of the county records The house is in his name, inherited from his father. If he died without a will, it would go to his wife. But if there was a divorce, she would lose everything. Suddenly, Mr. Henderson entered the station, accompanied by Noah. The boy ran straight to Jenkins as if she were a longtime friend. "Detective Jenkins." "Mommy is mad at me for talking about Daddy," Noah said, climbing onto the chair next to her desk. "Why is she mad, sweetie?" "She said they're gonna take her away now, and I'll be all alone. But I told her you seem nice, and you won't let that happen." Jenkins's heart sank. This innocent child had no idea of the gravity of the situation he had unleashed with his brutal honesty. "Noah, do you remember anything else about the night your mommy was quiet?" The boy thought for a moment. "Mommy cried a lot after that, and she talked on the phone with a man who called her my love. Daddy never called her that." Mr. Henderson and Jenkins exchanged meaningful glances. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place: an extramarital affair. "And do you know who that man on the phone was?" "I don't know his name, but he came to the house once when Daddy was at work. Mommy said he was Uncle John, but Daddy doesn't have a brother." Noah swung his legs in his chair. "And they kissed on the mouth, like Mommy and Daddy used to do before they started fighting all the time." Jenkins closed her eyes for a moment. A 5-year-old had provided more useful information in 2 conversations than many detectives could get in weeks of investigation. Noah's innocence was both a blessing and a curse. He saw everything but didn't understand the devastating implications of what he had witnessed. While Gregory Hayes was probably at home, coldly calculating how to expedite the life insurance process and plan his new life with his lover, a brave little boy had just handed justice the information it needed to unravel a premeditated murder. What the arrogant widower didn't know was that every veiled threat and every elaborate lie only dug his grave deeper, while the innocent truth of a child became the most powerful weapon Jenkins had ever held in her hands. Jenkins knew that taking on an influential family would require more than police intuition. It would require surgical strategy. While Gregory Hayes probably slept peacefully, confident in his expensive lawyers and political connections, the detective spent the night building a case he would never see coming. "Miller, I need you to do something unofficial for me," Jenkins said, lowering her voice in the empty station. "Do you know anyone at the telecom company who can help us with cell phone location records?" Miller smiled mischievously. "My brother-in-law works there. What kind of unofficial information do you need?" "Isabelle Hayes' cell phone location on the night of her disappearance, and, if possible, data from the tower closest to the Hayes home." Jenkins scribbled notes in a notebook she kept away from the official files. "I want to know if her phone was stationary in any specific location." Meanwhile, Mr. Henderson had become an unexpectedly valuable ally. The retired man had something Jenkins desperately needed: time, patience, and the invisible ability that only elderly neighbors have to observe everything without being noticed. "Detective," he called mid-morning, whispering into the phone. "Gregory is packing 2 big suitcases, and that man Noah mentioned, Uncle John, is helping him." Jenkins felt her adrenaline spike. "Can you see his license plate?" "I already wrote it down. And there's more. They're taking boxes out of the basement, boxes that look too heavy for 2 people to carry with such difficulty." "Mr. Henderson, you're a better detective than half my officers." Jenkins smiled for the first time in days. "Keep watching, but keep your distance. If they realize they're being watched." "Detective, I have 70 years of experience watching people. They won't notice me." The pause in the conversation was interrupted by Miller, who returned with information that would make Gregory Hayes completely rethink his arrogance. "Jenkins, my brother-in-law, got the data. Isabelle Hayes' cell phone was stationary at her residence from 10 p.m. until 3 a.m. on the day of the disappearance. After that, the signal just died." exactly the time Noah said he witnessed the argument and assault. Jenkins closed her eyes, feeling the pieces fall into place. And were you able to identify Uncle John? John Wallace, 42 years old, financial advisor. And here's where it gets interesting. He has an offshore shell company registered under the name of guess who? Gregory Hayes. A shell company registered 3 months before Isabelle disappeared. They've been planning an exit for a long time. At that moment, Jenkins had an idea that would make all the difference. She called Dr. Angela Moore, a renowned child psychologist and one of the few people she trusted completely to handle sensitive cases. Angela, I need a favor. I have a 5-year-old boy who witnessed something traumatic. He's already spoken to me, but I need someone with your experience to validate his statement so that it's irrefutable in court. Sarah, you know that statements from children this young are rarely accepted as evidence. This is different, Angela. This child has details that only an eyewitness could have, and if we can document it properly with your expertise, we have a real chance of getting justice. Dr. Moore agreed to meet Noah that afternoon. Meanwhile, Jenkins prepared her riskiest move, confronting Gregory Hayes before he could get away, but this time with questions he would never expect. Miller, let's pay Mr. Hayes a social call. Nothing official. Just check in to see how he's handling his wife's disappearance. Jenkins's smile had a predatory quality. Sometimes the most arrogant people make the stupidest mistakes when they feel too secure. As they drove to the Hayes home, Jenkins knew she was playing a dangerous game. Gregory had probably already called his lawyers, but there was one thing that all the money in the world couldn't buy: the innocent truth of a child who hadn't yet learned to lie. What Gregory Hayes didn't know was that every veiled threat, every condescending smile, and every attempt to use privilege to escape justice only fueled the determination of a woman who had dedicated her entire life to protecting the vulnerable from the powerful. And when the truth finally came out, no lawyer would be expensive enough to contain the damage. Arriving at the house, Jenkins noticed the suitcases in John's car and smiled inwardly. Guilty people always make the same mistake. They think they're smarter than everyone else. But this time, arrogance would be the very instrument of his downfall, and justice would come through the honest words of a brave boy who refused to keep secrets about the mother he loved. Jenkins knocked on the Hayes' door with the confidence of someone holding all the winning cards. When Gregory opened the door, his fake smile disappeared when he saw the determined expression on the detective's face. Mr. Hayes, I'm glad to find you still here. From what I can see, you're getting ready for a trip. Jenkins discreetly pointed to the suitcases in John's car, who quickly hid behind the curtain. Just a long weekend to clear our heads while we wait for news about Isabelle. Gregory tried to keep his tone casual, but his hands were shaking slightly. Interesting, especially considering that I just discovered something fascinating about your wife's cell phone. Jenkins took an envelope from her pocket. Cell tower data shows that her phone was stationary here at your house from 10 p.m. until exactly 3 a.m. on the day of her disappearance. After that, the signal dropped completely. Gregory's face paled visibly. She must have forgotten her charger. Funny, because Noah told me that was exactly when he witnessed you attacking Isabelle with a cast-iron skillet. Jenkins watched every micro-expression on Gregory's face. And there's more. We found your shell company registered jointly with John Wallace. At that moment, John appeared at the door, clearly nervous. Gregory, who is that? John Wallace, I presume? The Uncle John Noah mentioned. Jenkins smiled coldly. Interesting how a 5-year-old can be more honest than 2 adults with college degrees. You can't prove anything. Gregory tried to regain his composure, but his voice already sounded desperate. It's just speculation based on the fantasies of a traumatized child. Jenkins laughed darkly. Speculation, Mr. Hayes? While you thought you were being clever, Mr. Henderson has been documenting your every move, including the heavy boxes you took out of the basement earlier today. The blood drained completely from John's face.
Gregory, you said no one was paying attention.
Shut up, Gregory screamed, completely losing control for the first time. And there's more, Jenkins continued, relishing every second of the revelation. We've gained access to the bank records of your shell company. Suspicious transfers, money disappearing from Isabelle's joint account, and attempts to speed up the life insurance. Did you really believe you could murder a woman, bury her in her own home, and still profit from it? John began to sweat visibly.
Gregory, you told me she had agreed to an amicable divorce. You lied about everything, you idiot.
Gregory turned on John like a cornered animal. You believed a woman like Isabelle would split her inheritance with me? She was going to leave me penniless. Jenkins watched the pair collapse with satisfaction. Arrogant people always destroy themselves when the pressure mounts. You know what impresses me the most? Jenkins continued calmly. You completely underestimated a 5-year-old child. You thought you could manipulate Noah into keeping quiet about his own mother's murder. What kind of monsters do that? Gregory was shaking with rage and despair. That boy doesn't understand anything. He doesn't know what he saw. He knew enough to lead us straight to his mother's body, and he knew enough to describe exactly how you killed Isabelle with an iron pot while she had her back turned. Jenkins moved closer. And the most ironic part? If you had treated Noah with love and care, he might never have spoken. But you terrorized him so much that he trusted strangers over his own father. John began to cry uncontrollably. I didn't know he was going to kill anyone. I just helped with the money. You helped bury the body, John. Noah saw you digging with his father. Jenkins showed no mercy. And now you're both going to get to know the justice system you tried to cheat. Gregory made one last desperate attempt. You can't trust the word of a child against 2 respectable adults. Respectable adults? Jenkins laughed openly. A murderer and her accomplice who tried to profit from the crime. And what about the child? He gave us information that led directly to physical evidence, telecommunications data, and financial records. Noah's innocent truth was more reliable than all of your elaborate lies. At that moment, sirens began to wail in the distance. Jenkins had called for backup before arriving. The most pathetic thing of all, Jenkins concluded as the police cars approached, is that you destroyed a family, traumatized an innocent child, and ruined your own lives out of pure greed. Isabelle Hayes was a decent woman who deserved much better than a murderous husband and a cowardly death. Gregory collapsed in tears of despair when he realized there was no way out. John tried to run, but Jenkins had already blocked all escape routes. The arrogance that had sustained them for days had completely evaporated, replaced by the raw panic of those who finally understood that justice had come at the hands of a brave boy who refused to keep secrets about the mother he loved. 6 months after the trial that shocked the city, Jenkins was in her office when she received a call that made her smile for the first time in weeks. It was Mr. Henderson, now Noah's legal guardian, with news that warmed her heart. Detective, you need to know, Noah is thriving at his new school. The psychologist said he's recovering beautifully, and yesterday he asked me if he could write you a letter. Jenkins looked out the window, remembering the brave little boy who had changed everything with his brutal honesty. And how is he handling everything? He understands that his father did something very wrong, but he doesn't hold any anger. Yesterday he said to me, Grandpa Henderson, I helped Mommy not be forgotten, right? The man's voice broke. That child has a wisdom that many adults will never have. Meanwhile, at the state men's penitentiary, Gregory Hayes was discovering that privilege and money don't buy respect among inmates. Sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, He spent his days in isolation, shunned even by other prisoners who despised someone who would kill their own wife and traumatize a child. John Wallace was no luckier. Sentenced to 25 years as an accomplice, he lost not only his freedom, but also the entire fortune he had helped Gregory steal from Isabelle. The offshore investments that had seemed so smart evaporated when authorities froze all the shell company's accounts. The irony was delicious. Two sophisticated adults who thought they were too smart to be caught by a 5-year-old ended up destroyed by the very innocents they tried to exploit. Dr. Angela Moore, the psychologist who had documented Noah's trauma, became a fierce advocate for the rights of child victims of domestic crime. The Noah Hayes case changed how we treat child testimony. She explained in lectures across the country. A child who hasn't learned to lie can be the most reliable witness there is. Jenkins often received calls from other detectives consulting on similar cases. The Noah Protocol, as it became known, established guidelines for investigating crimes based on children's accounts, saving dozens of families from similar situations. The house where Isabelle was murdered stood empty for months until Mr. Henderson suggested something that made Jenkins smile. Why don't we turn it into a community center? A place where kids can play and feel safe to speak up when something is wrong. The proposal was unanimously approved by the City Council. The Isabelle Hayes Center has become a symbol of how a child's truth can transform tragedy into hope. On the first anniversary of Isabelle's death, Jenkins visited the grave with Noah and Mr. Henderson. The boy, now 6, placed yellow flowers, his mother's favorite, on the grave and whispered, "Mommy, everyone knows you were a good person. No one will forget." Jenkins knelt beside Noah. "You know you're a hero, right? Because of your courage, your mother got justice, and you're safe." Noah smiled with that ancient wisdom that some children develop after weathering storms. "I just told the truth, Aunt Sarah. Grandpa Henderson taught me that lying hurts more than the truth." Months later, Jenkins learned that Gregory had tried to appeal the sentence, arguing that a child's testimony should not have been considered. The request was denied in less than 24 hours. The judge was clear. Credibility has no age. This child has shown more integrity and courage than many adults who have come before this court. The last news about John came through the newspapers. He had lost his mind in prison, repeating obsessively, "The boy knew. The boy knew everything," until he was transferred to the psychiatric ward. Jenkins kept in her drawer a photo that Mr. Henderson had taken of Noah at the community center playground, smiling on the swing that had been donated in memory of his mother. Whenever a difficult case came across her desk, she would look at that photo and remember, sometimes justice comes through the most unlikely voices. The arrogance of Gregory Hayes, who believed he could manipulate a child and cheat the system, had become his own social and legal death sentence. And Noah, the little boy who just wanted his mother not to be forgotten, proved that the truth whispered by an innocent heart is more powerful than all the lies concocted by corrupt hearts.